There is a version of you that existed before this relationship began. You may not remember her clearly. You may not remember him clearly. That version has become blurry, distant, like a photograph left too long in the sun. But that person was real. That person had opinions that were fully their own. That person laughed easily, trusted their own instincts, slept through the night, made decisions without running them past someone else's imagined judgment first. That person is not gone. But that person is buried under layers of adaptation that took years to install and will take years to unlearn. By the end of this video, you will understand what actually happens inside a survivor of a dark triad relationship in the months and years after they leave. Why the healing is slower than anyone tells you, what the specific stages look like, and what the research and clinical experience have identified as the practices that actually work. Not the quick fixes, not the pop psychology reassurances, but the deep restorative work that gives you back the person you were before. This video is for you if you are somewhere on that road right now. Not at the beginning, when the shock is still fresh. Not at the end, when the healing is complete. But in the long middle, where most survivors live for far longer than they expected. Let me walk with you for a while. The first thing you need to understand about healing from a dark triad relationship is that the timeline is not what you were told. Most people, including many well-meaning therapists, will tell you that with time, the pain will fade. That after a few months you will feel better. That after a year, you will have moved on. For ordinary breakups, this timeline is roughly accurate. For dark triad relationships, it is dramatically wrong. Research on survivors of psychologically abusive relationships consistently shows that the recovery timeline is measured not in months, but in years. 2 to 5 years on average for the deepest symptoms to substantially resolve. Longer for many. And even after that, subtle after effects can persist for a decade or more. This is not because you are weak. This is because the damage was structural. An ordinary breakup damages your feelings about a specific person. A dark triad relationship damages your relationship with reality itself. It rewires the way you interpret warmth, love, trust, and your own perceptions. Repairing that wiring is a fundamentally deeper project than getting over an ex. Understanding this timeline is not meant to discourage you. It is meant to protect you from something more damaging than the length of the road. The damage of self-judgment along the way. Because most survivors, somewhere between month 6 and month 18, begin to conclude that there must be something wrong with them for still hurting. They compare themselves to friends who moved on faster from ordinary breakups. They read articles about resilience and wonder why they cannot access it. They begin to add shame on top of grief. This layered shame slows the healing more than any external factor. So let me say this clearly. Your timeline is not evidence that you are broken. Your timeline is evidence of what you survived. The people who healed in 3 months from something similar are outliers or were involved in something less severe. The people who took 3 years or 5 or 7 are the norm. You are not behind. You are on schedule for what actually happened to you. The second thing you need to understand is that healing from these relationships is not linear. You will not steadily improve. You will not experience a straightforward decline in symptoms over time. You will have weeks that feel like real progress, followed by a memory ambush that flattens you for days. You will feel almost yourself again, and then a familiar song will play in a store, and you will find yourself crying in the parking lot. You will get to a place where you have not thought about them for a full day, and then a dream will bring them back so vividly you wake up disoriented about which decade you are in. These regressions are not backward movement. They are part of the shape of this specific kind of healing. The nervous system heals the way rivers carve stone, not steadily, in pulses, in floods, in long, dry periods followed by sudden erosion. You cannot force the pulses to arrive on your preferred schedule. You can only be with what is arriving today, tend it with care, and trust that the overall trajectory is toward the shore. The mistake many survivors make is trying to bypass the pulses, trying to intellectualize their way past the grief, trying to be productive through the flashback week, trying to date their way out of the loneliness before the healing has caught up. Each of these bypasses seems reasonable in the moment. Each of them ultimately extends the timeline. Because the grief that is not processed today does not disappear. It waits, it ferments, it returns later with more force. The counterintuitive truth of healing from these relationships is that going through the pain is faster than going around. Sit with the flashback, cry through the memory, feel the loneliness without immediately filling it. Take the days when your body needs them. The healing is not happening in the moments of productivity. It is happening in the moments of surrender. The third thing you need to understand is that there are specific stages, and they arrive roughly in order, though never cleanly. The first stage is often shock and disbelief. In the immediate aftermath of leaving or being discarded, most survivors describe a strange numbness, not peace, not relief, a kind of blank suspension. The mind cannot yet fully absorb what has happened. Reality is being processed in pieces, at a rate the psyche can tolerate. During this stage, survivors often function surprisingly well. They go to work, they make dinner, they tell their friends they are doing okay. They may even wonder why the anticipated devastation has not yet arrived. It will arrive, but not immediately. The psyche is buying time to prepare. The second stage is often collapse. This tends to arrive weeks or months after the ending, sometimes triggered by a specific event, sometimes by nothing external at all. The shock lifts and the full weight of what happened lands. The collapse can be severe. Difficulty getting out of bed, difficulty eating, difficulty concentrating, waves of grief that come from nowhere, a sudden inability to be alone, a sudden inability to be with others, a deep disorienting sense that you do not know who you are anymore. This stage is terrifying to survivors who did not expect it. Many mistakenly believe they should have already moved on because they left the relationship weeks or months ago, and now, illogically, they are worse than before. There is nothing illogical about it. The collapse is the psyche finally processing what the shock stage was buffering. This is not regression. This is the actual grief finally arriving. The third stage is often obsession. Somewhere in the middle of the collapse or shortly after, most survivors enter a period of intense, involuntary rumination. Their mind returns over and over to the relationship, analyzing it, trying to make sense of it, trying to identify the exact moment things went wrong, trying to remember the good times to see if they were real, trying to catalog the bad times to remind themselves why they had to leave. They may find themselves searching their ex on social media compulsively, reading and rereading old messages, constructing hypothetical conversations they will never have, rehearsing what they wish they had said. This obsession is not a character flaw. It is a specific stage of neurological healing. The brain is trying to integrate an experience that did not fit any of its existing templates. It is running the experience through its processors again and again, trying to construct a coherent story out of what happened. This stage will pass, but it can last much longer than you expect. 6 months, 9 months, sometimes over a year. The good news is the obsession, over time, changes character. In the beginning, it is entirely about them. Later, it becomes about you and them. Later still, it becomes about you, with them as a fading backdrop. The gradual shift of the obsession center from them to you is one of the surest signs of progress. You will know you are healing when you notice one day that you have been thinking about your future for an hour without thinking about them at all. The fourth stage is often identity reconstruction. Once the obsession begins to loosen, a strange, difficult, and ultimately beautiful stage emerges. You begin to ask yourself, who you actually are. Not who you were with them, not who you became to please them, not who you tried to be to survive them. Who you are at the center when no one is watching. Many survivors at this stage realize with a jolt that they no longer know. Years of adaptation have obscured the answer. The person they were before the relationship feels distant and unfamiliar. The person they became during the relationship was largely a survival construction. The person they were expected to be after the relationship is dictated by other people's timelines. None of these is the real answer. The real answer has to be excavated, slowly, through solitude, through experimentation, through choosing small things without asking anyone for input, through noticing what genuinely draws you and what genuinely repels you when there is no one to perform for. This stage is where the deepest healing happens, not the removal of pain, the reconstruction of self. Survivors who move through this stage well often report that in some strange way, they feel more themselves after the relationship than they ever did before it, because they were forced, by the destruction, to rebuild consciously. And what they rebuilt is more chosen, more grounded, more theirs. The final stage is often reintegration. At some point, usually years after the relationship ended, though the timeline varies, a survivor notices that they can think about the relationship without the old charge. They can hear the ex's name mentioned in conversation without their heart racing. They can encounter a memory without falling into it. They can even sometimes feel a strange gratitude for what the experience taught them, without in any way endorsing what happened. This is reintegration. The experience has been metabolized. It is no longer a live wound. It is now part of the larger story of your life, a chapter that shaped you but no longer controls you. You will still remember. You may still occasionally be tender in certain places, but you are no longer defined by what happened. You are defined by who you have become since. This is what healing actually looks like on the far side. Not amnesia, not indifference, just integration. Now, if you have made it this far, you already understand the terrain better than most survivors ever do. But the most important part of this video is coming next. Because I have told you the shape of the road, now I need to tell you what actually helps you walk it. Not the platitudes, not the surface advice, the specific practices drawn from clinical experience with survivors that measurably accelerate the deep recovery. There are 5 of them, and each addresses a different layer of what these relationships damage. Let me walk you through each one. The first practice is deliberate, radical no contact. I want to be very careful here because this is not just about the ex. No contact, in its most restorative form, includes every conduit through which they can continue to shape your inner life. Blocking their number is only the beginning. It also means unfollowing their social media, muting mutual friends who repeatedly bring them up, avoiding the places you know they frequent, at least in the early months, not checking whether they have moved on, not asking mutual acquaintances how they are doing, not seeking any information about them, direct or indirect. This is not because you are afraid of them. It is because your nervous system, in the early stages of healing, cannot handle intermittent exposure. Every time you see their name, their face, or a piece of news about them, your brain releases the same cocktail of chemicals it released during the relationship. You are, in effect, being redosed, and each redosing extends your withdrawal. Complete cessation of exposure is what allows the nervous system to fully complete a cycle of unlearning. Most survivors underestimate how strict this needs to be, especially in the first 6 to 12 months. They allow themselves small exceptions. One quick look, one question to a friend, one drive past their apartment. Each exception feels harmless. Each exception delays the healing by weeks. If you can maintain radical, complete, no contact for a solid year, you will be measurably further along than survivors who allowed even small exposures. This is not about them. It is about giving your nervous system the empty space it needs to reset. The second practice is documentation of what actually happened. Dark Triad relationships install a specific cognitive distortion in the survivor. Over time, the memory of the relationship becomes softer, warmer, more forgiving of the ex than the reality warranted. This is not because you are choosing to romanticize them. It is because the brain, in the absence of ongoing evidence of harm, tends to smooth over painful details and preserve the pleasant ones. If you leave this process unchecked, you will find yourself 6 months or a year in, wondering if it was really as bad as you thought, wondering if you were the problem, wondering if you should have tried harder, wondering if you should reach out. The antidote is written documentation, created while your memory is still clear. Write down, in detail, the specific incidents, the moments of cruelty, the gaslighting, the manipulations, the times you cried alone, the nights you could not sleep, the things they said that hurt you, the things they did that you cannot unknow. Do not sanitize this document. Do not edit it for kindness. Write it as raw as it actually was. Then keep it, somewhere private, somewhere you can return to when the softening begins. Because the softening will begin, and when it does, the document will be there, waiting to remind you of what your mind is trying to blur. This is not about maintaining anger. Anger, held for its own sake, does not heal. But clarity, the accurate memory of what actually occurred, is one of the most protective forces available to a survivor. Return to the document not to reactivate the wound, but to reground the truth when your mind tries to rewrite it. The third practice is sustained work with a therapist who specifically understands these relationships. This is not the same as general therapy. General therapy, offered by well-meaning clinicians who have not specialized in psychological abuse, can sometimes make survivors worse. Because a therapist who does not understand the dynamics may inadvertently encourage the survivor to look at their own contributions to the relationship failure. In an ordinary relationship, this framing is helpful. In a dark triad relationship, it can re-traumatize. You need a therapist who understands narcissistic abuse, coercive control, complex trauma, someone who will not push you to explore your role in the dysfunction before you have fully understood the dynamics that were used against you. Someone who will validate the reality of what happened before working through the pieces of yourself that you are still trying to reclaim. This kind of therapy is often called trauma-informed care. It moves at the pace of the survivor's nervous system. It centers safety before insight. It builds the containers before it opens the wounds. If you can find this kind of specialized support, it is one of the highest leverage investments you can make in your recovery. If you cannot access it for financial reasons, there are books, communities, and online resources by qualified professionals that can partially substitute, though live therapeutic relationship remains the gold standard. Do not try to heal this alone, not because you are incapable, but because these wounds specifically involve the reality-distorting effect of a manipulative relationship. And a healing relationship with a skilled outside person is often what restores your access to your own perceptions. You need another mind to help you rebuild the mind that was damaged by another mind. The fourth practice is nervous system regulation. Dark triad relationships leave the survivor with a specific form of trauma that is different from single-event trauma. It is not the trauma of a car accident. It is the trauma of prolonged, low-level, unpredictable stress, often for years. This form of trauma lives in the body more than in the mind. It shows up as chronic hypervigilance, as difficulty relaxing, as startling easily, as sleep disturbances, as digestive problems, as unexplained fatigue, as a persistent sense of unease that has no clear source. You cannot think your way out of body-based trauma. You have to work with the body directly. The practices that reliably support this work are the practices that regulate the nervous system through the body itself. Deep, slow breathing that engages the vagus nerve. Regular, gentle exercise, especially walking outdoors. Yoga or somatic movement practices that reconnect you to sensation. Cold water exposure, in moderation, which strengthens vagal tone. Consistent sleep routines that give the nervous system predictable rest. Time in nature, which measurably reduces cortisol. None of these practices are glamorous. None of them promise transformation in a week. But over months, they accumulate. The nervous system, given consistent signals of safety, begins to slowly recalibrate. The chronic hyperarousal fades. The body begins to trust that the danger has passed. This is one of the slowest and quietest layers of healing, but it may be the most foundational. Because until the body knows it is safe, the mind cannot fully rest. The fifth practice is the gradual, deliberate reconstruction of your capacity to trust. This is the deepest and longest of all the practices, and it is the one most survivors are most afraid of. Because after what happened, trusting again feels either impossible or reckless. Some survivors respond by refusing to trust anyone. Some respond by trusting too quickly and finding themselves in a similar situation within a year. Neither extreme leads to healing. The practice you need is calibrated trust. Trust extended in appropriate increments based on demonstrated behavior over time. Not trust withheld from everyone as a blanket policy. Not trust extended to strangers as a demonstration of resilience. Trust rebuilt slowly with people who have earned it through consistent action over months. Begin with small trusts. A friend you can share a mild vulnerability with and observe what they do with it. A colleague you can rely on for a small favor and see whether they follow through. A family member you can spend time with and notice whether you feel more or less regulated in their presence. Over months, notice which relationships have proven safe. Not perfect, safe. Which relationships give you back the same energy you put in? Which relationships allow you to be tired, honest, or mistaken without punishment? Which relationships are still there when you have nothing to offer? These are the relationships that begin to teach your nervous system that not everyone is a threat. Then, and only then, extend larger vulnerabilities, deeper disclosures, more significant trust. Match the trust to the accumulated evidence. This is how the capacity is rebuilt, not through a grand leap of faith, through hundreds of small, carefully calibrated experiences of trust well placed. Some survivors at the far end of this process find that they are more capable of intimacy than they were before the relationship, because they have learned through hard experience how to actually observe people, how to distinguish performance from character, how to trust with wisdom rather than with hope. The capacity to love was not destroyed by what happened. It was interrupted, and it can be restored. Let me close with one final truth. There will be a moment somewhere along this road when you realize that you are no longer the person who left the relationship. You are not the person who was in the relationship either. You are someone new, someone who was forged by what you survived, someone who now knows things about human nature and about your own resilience that you could not have learned any other way. This person is not a lesser version of who you were before. This person is often, in ways that are difficult to describe, more real, more discerning, more rooted in what actually matters, less easily fooled, less willing to compromise their own truth, more able to distinguish authentic love from its imitations. The relationship took things from you, real things, things you should not have had to lose. But it also gave you something, not intentionally, not benevolently, but real nonetheless. It gave you a form of wisdom that unearned lives never quite reach. You did not choose this wisdom. You would have preferred to learn it another way. Nothing about the process was fair or deserved. But now that you have it, Do not squander it. Use it to protect yourself for the rest of your life. Use it to protect others when you see them approaching the same trap. Use it to build a life that is more honest, more grounded, and more genuinely your own than the life you might have built otherwise. This is the strange gift buried inside the wound. Not a gift you would have chosen, but a gift you can now, having survived, unwrap. Let me leave you with this. The person you were before the relationship is not gone. She is not lost. He is not dead. They are still inside you, waiting to be met again. But they will not come back exactly as they were. They will come back changed, wiser, slower to trust, deeper in feeling, more discerning in love, more honest about what is real. The version of you that emerges from this healing will not be the version you were before it began. She will be more. He will be more. They will be more. And when you meet this new version of yourself, months or years from now, in some ordinary moment, making coffee on a Sunday morning, walking home after work, laughing with a friend about something small, you will recognize her. You will recognize him. You will feel something quiet and true and steady, and you will realize that you have finally come home to yourself. That is the destination of this long road. Not the erasure of what happened, not the forgetting of what you lost. The return to yourself. And every practice I have described, every hour of solitude, every session of therapy, every deliberate breath, every moment of calibrated trust is a step on that road home. The road is long, but you are walking it, and the fact that you are still here, still watching a video like this, still searching for the way through, is itself proof of something they never understood about you. You do not break. You rebuild. And what you rebuild will be worthy of the person you were always becoming, before, during, and after everything they tried to take from you. Keep walking. The person you are becoming is worth every step. If this video reached you where you needed to be reached, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach the people who are still in the middle of this healing. Subscribe if you want more content that pulls back the curtain on the psychology of recovery, resilience, and human restoration. And in the comments below, I want to know, where are you on this road? What stage are you in? What has helped you most so far? Your honesty could be the reason someone else finds the courage to keep going. In my next video, I'm going to reveal something almost no one talks about. The specific patterns that emerge in people who have healed fully from these relationships. The traits, the practices, the mindsets that survivors carry forward into the rest of their lives. Not survival mode, not vigilance. A specific kind of quiet strength that only this journey produces. You do not want to miss it. Until then, stay awake, stay aware. And remember, the road home is long, but it leads somewhere real. Keep walking. You are closer than you think.